Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by Onyx Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is Onyx Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, Onyx Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust Onyx Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about Onyx, go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbley's rifle. I've been rocking their Coda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbley's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbley's rifles, go to kelbley.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mack sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbley Rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and this week's episode is one that is very near and dear to my heart. As this guest, I have been following on LinkedIn for quite some time, and every now and then he puts out these posts talking about hunting and inspiration and motivation and how hunting is impactful to his life and how it can be an impact to others as well. And I'm like, okay, who is this guy? Who is this guy? I need to get to know him. And then all of a sudden he posted about this book he released called Your Hunting Healthspan. And I was like, Your Hunting Healthspan? What? Who? Come on. What's this all about? So I looked him up. I connected with him. I found out, I read his book. I found out he's exactly what the Soul Seekers podcast needs and all you guys out there need to listen to, because I never will should on you. I'll never say you should do something, but I am going to say you need to hear this, because inspired people inspire people. When we live inspired, it naturally radiates and permeates through society. And when we live our true authentic self, we're doing what we're called to do. And that fellow is Linden Loren, the author of Your Hunting Healthspan. We got him on as a guest tonight. We're going to be talking all about that. I'm going to bring in a lot of my education in the health background and teaching, along with my journey of hunting, and we're going to be diving in. So without further ado, the man of the hour, Mr. Linden Loren. How are you, brother?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Dude, it's great. I love podcasting. I don't know at any other point in my life where I've been able to have dedicated, uninterrupted conversations with people and ask whatever types of questions I want and get the information. Like, I started podcasting because I didn't know how to hunt. I was like, well, how do I learn how to hunt? You got to have community and talk to people. And I didn't have that big of a community at the time. So I was like, all right, well, a podcast gives me instant access to almost any potential guest that I really wanted. And so it's fun. And so here we are, just like you get to be on the show tonight. I'm really excited. So how is everything with you, brother?
Everything's good. Currently, like I was saying earlier, we just purchased a house and some property, so we're doing a little remodel. So things are in boxes, kids are running around screaming, and kind of a little of everything. Yeah.
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 And where do you live?
I live in Oregon, Willamette Valley, Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are
Born
you
and raised here.
born and raised in
Born
Oregon?
well, born and raised in Oregon, but, I grew up in the Southern Oregon coast.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Oregon is okay. So I grew up in Washington, and my mother grew up in California. And I always say that everyone who lives in Oregon is just from California that's too lazy to make it all the way up to Washington. And that's why they have the speed
Uh,
limit be 55 and 65.
that is hilarious. Actually, small world. So my mother's actually from California, and my father was from Washington, and they kinda met in the halfway. That's kinda funny you say that. Yeah.
I love it.
Speed limit, yeah.
So I was doing some reading. You've been writing for the outdoor space for quite some time, it seems like? Or is this something
Um,
that's been sparked within you recently?
that's a great question. In terms of outdoor space, I've written for a few various websites, but none of the writing started until I started writing the book, really. In fact, I like despised writing before I wrote the book.
Yeah.
And the book wasn't planned, it was by mistake, and that's a whole nother story in itself. But yeah, so it's just kind of been happening the last few years.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit of writing in and working on the second. I have a second book too.
Ooh, a second book. What's that called? Or can you spill the beans yet?
I can't reveal it simply because it does not currently exist in the hunting space, and I think I'm the person that needs to write it, and it's gonna change a lot of things. So I'm pretty excited about it, and I just can't reveal it at this moment.
Okay. Well, um, touche. I understand. I felt when I came up with my mentorship as conservation um, platform, I was like, dude, I have to hurry and get this to market because I
Yeah,
don't want someone else
own
to
it.
steal it. Yeah, I want to own it.
Yeah.
I want to be known as that. At the same time, a friend of mine, Josh Kirshner, the Dialed In Hunter, if you're familiar with him,
Yeah, yep.
him and I, we've chatted quite a bit. I actually started writing my book before he's published both of his, and I've yet to release mine. It's just life is interesting how it works out. But
Oh, it
but
is.
what he told me one time is he goes, it doesn't matter how many time a topic has been written about or spoken about. No one's written or spoken about it from your perspective. And I was like, there you go.
100%.
So it doesn't matter. There you go.
Yep.
You know,
There's no way someone else wrote the exact same words, the exact feeling, the emotion in it. Like nuclear impossible. So whatever you come up with, it's authentic and it will be impactful.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, some of the articles that Linden has written for American Bear Foundation is setting a new standard, role models for future generations, and bears, a value statement, obviously the book, your hunting lifespan. And so I can tell that you're a soulful dude. And I would hope that more people pick up the torch and become more soulful in their lives day to day. But it feels like we deal with a lot of NPCs, non-player characters in this world that just kind of, I go to work and I come home and I do this and they go through the robotic motions of life without the William Wallace of all men die, but not all men truly live, right? We
Mhm.
want to live with that fire, that passion, that contagious joy that is inspiring. So you come from a background of hunting. Your father was a hunting guide up in Alaska.
Yeah, for a little bit, he guided bears. He guided bear hunters, and my mother archery hunted too when I was growing up for deer.
Fascinating. What was it like
Yeah,
growing up in a household where your parents hunted? That's a perspective I have no concept of.
yeah. I just thought it was the norm. I was taken to bear camp and archery camp when I was the age of 2, and so when recent harvest would come into camp, and there's about a camp of 15 people, it was normal for me to see everyone processing a bear, deer, elk right in front of me,
Hmm.
and be surrounded by bows and see the arrows and see people putting on camo face paint and all that. And my mom, she actually helped me skin my first deer because my father was out hunting.
Oh wow.
And so, yeah, just being immersed in it, I just thought that's just how it was.
Yeah.
I was pretty fortunate. Like I grew up way up in the woods in a cabin, so I had public land right behind me and a lot of wilderness access. So I was very fortunate to be in the area that I was in during that time.
With both of your parents hunting, was it were you left alone a lot or were you always brought along?
I was always brought along for the ride. Yeah, I was brought to camp, and so what they would do is they would take turns periodically. So my dad would go like out in the morning, and then maybe come back, and then my mom would go out in the afternoon, and then I would go with him sometimes. It would just they'd be smart about it, and I would be with one of them. They would never they've hunted with each other a few times during the early '90s,
Uh-huh.
and so then I was a little bit older, mid '90s, so I'd hang out with some people in camp. But for the most part, they were pretty strategic and like who was going where, and I was hanging out watching or
Yeah.
chasing squirrels or whatever.
Are you the oldest of all your siblings?
So I have 2 older brothers and I am the youngest.
Oh, so what were
I
they
am
doing during that time?
I'm the young gun. So one of them also hunts and he was in that camp. And the other one did a little bit of hunting, but he was more into fishing. So he wasn't in that camp, but my older brother was, and he had a bunch of his buddies and
Hmm.
they were scrambling around and uh we have the same father, but not the same mother. So
Okay.
they were a little bit older than me, so they were in a whole different range of like actually big game hunting, and I was young being brought up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the dynamic.
There you go. I always am intrigued by this because when I started hunting, I also became a father right away. And so I'm 10 years into my hunting journey. This year in what 2014 I became a hunter, quote unquote. I completed my hunter safety course and I went through the process. Um, in 2014 I also had my first child. And I have three
Wow.
three young boys and I have this constant like internal struggle of I have a lot I want to accomplish personally, and at the same time, I know I need to make sure that I instill this love and passion for what I do in them, and I don't want to spoil it because, you know, it wasn't until this last year that I finally shot more deer than I ever have black bear, right?
Yeah.
So I shot one branch antlered buck in the state of Washington, and it's not even a legal deer down here in the state of Texas now.
Oh wow.
And it's just like, oh, like what? So I'm struggling with this whole how do I bring my children with me to a gun range to teach them how to shoot or all this when it's just me and I don't my wife works as a nurse and so that's interesting perspective
It
of
Yeah,
hearing you get
it's a
brought
lot
along.
of balancing. It's a lot of balancing, and I'm in the same boat as trying to figure out, like, when the right time is to we've taken our son out when he was 2 and 3 to deer camp, and we would just alternate at camp, but also you're trying to accomplish everything you need to with soul seekers, so
Yeah.
you're doing all that work,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's, like, really trying to find the little niches of time. A lot of the writing I do is actually on the road via voice control,
Oh,
because that's a good way for me to be productive during that time frame and to get writing done.
yeah.
Yeah, so like when I'm on the way to the university, I'll just be talking to voice, and that's a good way for me to work on the second book without sacrificing time later at night with the family if that's what I choose. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
that's the direction. And so I'm trying to get better at refining those moments. Scrolling less, on your phone, you can definitely save time. Look at the settings, see how much percent
Yep.
you've been
Yep.
on there, and then calibrate that and be like, well, that's 4 hours. I could probably be working on this or that. So
Right.
I think there's strategic ways to puzzle things where you want it to be.
Yeah. What is your hunting journey? Obviously, you started in camp early on. At what point did you start finding success in the woods? And at what point, because based off of what I've seen or read about you, is you are already at that fifth stage of a hunter where you like to see other people have success and not that you're not still working on notching your own tags and getting the best representation of a species or any of that, but your hunting journey has gone beyond you, and a lot of people don't reach that yet. So what's been this transformation through you?
Well, that's a great question. I think in the beginning, when I hit the age of 12, that's when I could start big game hunting. You take your hunter safety and all that stuff. I was pretty involved with all of the hunts my father did. And at the time, it was traditional archery, which, if you're not familiar with, is quite difficult, especially if you don't practice.
Yeah.
So I was just thrown right into the mix of the most challenging way to hunt. And I was taken to some of the most intense and gnarly conditions, late season December elk. that will definitely break the spirit of most teenagers, including myself.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't personally maybe go down that route with my kids, but my father at the time, threw me right in, and that was just the norm, which meant I was cold. I had less than ideal equipment because it was passed down
Yeah.
gear. And so it was actually a struggle for me for the first few years trying to keep up, do things that I didn't really want to do, like in the cold with a trad bow that I could only shoot like 10, 15 yards.
Right.
Like, in all honesty. Um, so it was actually a struggle in the beginning, and then it kind of, transformed a little bit. I like I mentioned in the book, he passed away when I was 17, and so after that, I had actually kind of transitioned into a little bit more rifle hunting. I had some buddies that were into rifle hunting, and I did a little bit less traditional and kind of got into rifle hunting, and success started going up.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but for me, it was. And that was kind of my first real gauge of like, oh, whoa, this is like different than what, like, the grinding, the cold rain, the stick bow, the challenges. It was like complete opposite. So in that regard, I wish he could have experienced that because it was cool to really get some success. And he only got to see me be successful with one buck deer, which was a great blacktail. And then after that, the success started slowly increasing when I went to rifle, and I was going to different areas and expanding. Luckily, my older brother at the time, he started hunting with this group, and they got into. Have you heard of the Eagle Caps?
Hmm.
Eagle Cap Wilderness. So they got heavily involved in kind of doing that backcountry where they hop on horses, take the mules, pack all the gear, go back in, 10 miles or so and stay for 12 days.
Yeah.
And so when I was 19 and I was going to college, he knew that college freshman year for me was a really difficult time, which I kind of talk about in the book for a lot of reasons. And he brought me along, and then all of a sudden it felt like my success. I was like, man, I'm really getting momentum. And then I went in the Eagle Caps with not the best gear, not really an understanding of like physical and mental preparedness,
Uh-huh.
not really preparing my meals, none of that. And that was a sledgehammer to the face, so to speak. I it felt like I played 10 football games when I got back from that trip,
Hmm.
and that was a whole different world. And I felt like I have all of a sudden my steps of my experience and everything went backwards,
Hmm.
which is normal for going to a different environment. And I mean, everyone in that camp was 45 and older, and here I'm a 19-year-old,
Yeah.
going in this
Yep.
camp, getting just pushed pushed around, fatigued, all that stuff. So that's kind of where my hunting, career, so to speak, transitioned to. And then I did that for a long time, probably 10 or so years, hunting the eagle caps and not really anything else. And then when my wife and I got married and then we had a kid, it was like, okay, I'm gonna repurpose things. I don't want to be gone for 12 days. For me, I would rather be here. And I'm not saying that's the right choice. That's just the choice for me.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for me to leave for 12 days. We were married and I left for 10. And by day 7, I was like, I want to get back. Like,
Yeah.
I am not mentally in this hunt. And if I'm not mentally in the hunt, I should not be there
And
because I have to be crisp.
do you have a hard time hunting solo then because of that, or do you prefer to hunt with a buddy or solo?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the style of hunt and the tool of choice. I think it has to do with that. A lot of the bear stalks I did this last year were solo, but they were short hunts.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on the style of hunting. But 10 days, was really pushing it for me once family started happening,
Yeah.
which is a blessing. And so for me, I decided to kind of take the angle of like, let's establish some core values first and foremost, do the most I can for my wife and kids.
Yeah.
And then everything else and then my health, because without that, then I don't exist. And then everything else was kind of secondary and third, and that's hunting and all that stuff. So I just kind of work around that schedule now, and that's kind of where I've hunted Idaho before, um, quite a bit, and I'm most of the hunting I do is in Oregon right now,
I
and it's
love
just navigating schedules.
I love it. You remind me a lot of um, the movie The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise,
No.
where he's like, too many minds. one mind. Meaning the whole point is like when you're split with your thoughts and you're not 100% present in the moment of what you're doing, you're not going to be good at either.
Oh, it's quite difficult. Yeah, and you can tell the difference too, like, go into the woods with a lot of things not going well
Yeah, if
compared to a time. Yeah.
you leave home and everything's not right, oh,
Oh, it's way different. Yeah.
weighs on me so heavy when I'm out there.
Yeah, I think you just gotta check those boxes and, like, really just make sure every box good to go, crisp, you're going out there. I mean, when I went on this last spring bear hunt, everything had been checked, all the emails that I needed to do, all that work stuff, and when I hopped on a boat and we went up the river to go look for bears in these 300-foot cliffs, I was in a whole different mode.
Mhm.
I was ready. Yeah, like, I was ready to pack in really far. I was ready to hike up really steep cliffs at high altitudes and all that stuff, and I was freaking at that moment of time, I was on that mountain. I was nowhere else.
Beautiful. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, let's dive into this whole concept of your hunting health span, right? So, or excuse me, your hunting lifespan. Don't you use the term health span in your book though a couple times, right?
Yeah, yeah, so there's a distinct difference. So lifespan is just how many years you're basically on the planet. So from now till, let's say, you live to 103, so that'd be like your lifespan. Health span is like the quality of years you're on the planet.
Hmm.
And so my goal is with the book was to really create some more direction for others in terms of, hey, how about we, reposition some lifestyle choices so that like the quality of how you feel is heightened, and don't worry about how long you live, because most likely the quality will be so good that you'll get to where you want to be, and you'll be more independent, mental stability, all those things. So quality is a very crucial word that you see a lot in my book because it means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's really interesting this concept of retirement, right? Like,
Mm,
oh, we do everything that we don't want to do for the majority of our lives to hopefully get what 10 years of
maybe.
not yeah, for some people, right? Depending on how healthy they are
Yeah.
or all that. And that goes with the people that I feel like are ignorant to what's actually happening in this world and in their world and how much their decisions have a ripple effect through time.
100%. Stuff adds up.
Yeah,
It's the butterfly effect. It all adds up, and poor health defeats the purpose of retirement.
yeah. Well,
Literally.
the saying "health is wealth," right? You know,
Yeah, it is.
you're not going to be a wealthy person if you don't have your health. Being a PE teacher, and they always said my professors always would say is that you can't educate a child who isn't healthy, and you can't keep a child healthy who isn't educated.
Mm,
And this idea of like knowledge is power, application of knowledge is true power. Maybe even so wisdom, right? Like
yeah.
with that comes wisdom and experience. I always talk about on this podcast is that everybody has opinions. Very few people have perspectives, and perspectives come through experiences. I can speak about that because I experience it. Otherwise, I'm just a talking head repeating whatever information someone else told me, and then I don't have any real life experience. And this is why, when it comes to pro hunting and the defensive hunting and the amazing life transformation experience that it provides, is that all these people that are anti-hunting or on the fence, it's because they haven't gone out and experienced the transformational power. Because when you do, you're gonna be like, whoa, that is
Mhm.
something else. And now I'm not saying everyone needs to be a hunter, but everyone needs to understand and respect the process of hunting and the role of hunting in the community, right? Whether it's tribal roles or not, like there is the hunter back in tribal roles was the warrior, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was the person that was highly
Yeah.
respected, and now we're cast to the side. We're outcasts.
You just have to find what the general public need, what they all want and need. And most would probably say, well, they want mental clarity, they want a sense of ease and all those things. And
Mhm.
guess where those are? Out in nature.
Yeah.
So it's finding those things that they really want and then connecting the dots for where they can go get them.
Well, expand on that. Go ahead. You authored the book, man. Let's
Oh, geez.
talk about your passion, because I'll say this. Everyone wants, you just said, mental clarity and peace, right?
Sense of ease. Yep.
So I like to say that everybody is thirsts for adventure, but they don't know it. They are scared, and a lot of people live a comfortable bubble. Like, I can't get hurt or injured, or they live in fear. It's a life driven by fear rather than a life driven by a mindset of abundance.
Yeah. One of my favorite ways to reduce that fear is to go to an old folks facility and to talk with some of the residents, and you're going to uncover something called 80 to 90-year-old regret. And in that regret, you're going to notice there's about 2 to 3 phrases that you hear very often. And the ones that you're going to hear is, I wish I would have done this. I wish I wouldn't have worried about other people's opinions. And I wish I would have tried things and not worried about failing.
Mm,
And so if you can like internalize what those concepts mean and then look inward and say, you know what? I can right this moment reduce those three phrases from happening. Well, now you're flipping the coin. Now it's a whole different perspective. Because what do you do to, alleviate those three things? You act on them.
yeah.
If you know what 80-year-old regret looks like and you hear it from someone, right this moment, you can ensure that you're not going to fall into that category.
Right.
And at that moment, now you're going to uncover more confidence. You're going to take more risks. You're not going to worry about other people's opinions because most likely they're worried about their own, what everyone else thinks, and everyone's worried about each other
Yeah.
and in a vicious circle. And so if you could flip the script and like look at what most are saying when they're older, I think you leverage that and then you find ways.
Why do you think that's not taught? Like, truly, it's not ingrained in society.
That's that's a great question. Why is it not taught? At the time, like I had mentioned, I used to teach at a high school and I actually developed a class and curriculum called Human Potential. And things like that is what I taught because I saw a gap. And there was things that I thought would be really life practical, like practical for their life. And I'm not sure why that's not. I don't know if it's because we're just going through the mode of the 9 to 5, and this is what you do, and this is just standard living, and you're gonna get a house, and maybe you have a family, maybe you don't, and you're just gonna work, and there's not much more, but there is much more. That's 1%.
Mhm.
And if you start looking at, individuals who maybe are sitting in good positions mentally and physically, there's a reason for that. That didn't magically just happen. And so if you want to improve your position, no matter what it is, you can. You just have to take a step back and like really analyze the situation
Hmm.
and not worry about what others are doing and forming comparisons and focus on like what can you do at this moment of
Yeah. You're so funny. You're funny. I find this conversation funny and ironic, because when I was a health teacher, I would always refer to the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
time. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
When
Yeah.
they're him and Ferris Bueller, the girlfriend, and Cameron are in the art museum, and Cameron's standing like an inch away from that picture, and all he sees is a bunch of dots. But it's Ferris when he stands back and looks at it. It's this beautiful painting, and that's what you're talking about. Is like we miss so much because we're so hyper focused with blinders on, only seeing what's straight ahead rather than like stepping back, pausing, reflecting, and be like, oh wow, there's a lot more to this world and this life than what I was told or taught or modeled, or whatever term you want to throw out there.
You're spot on. I don't know if you saw the title of chapter 7 of my book, but it says, looking outside the binoculars, and that is exactly the concept I'm referring to. When you look in the binoculars, you only see what's in that lens. And when you step back, now you see the geometrical space of the mountains, you see the clouds, and now you take a step back a little bit more, and then you see a little bit more of the picture, what's going on, and then you just look at yourself.
Yeah,
And now you're at baseline.
yeah.
It takes a lot to get to that state though.
It does, and you actually mentioned it. Self-actualization actually reaches to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that top of the pyramid. That is what we hope that we strive for, but a lot of people never actually make it there because they don't know how to take a step back to remove themselves. Um, we can go down each individual topic so easily, but
Yeah.
let's back up for a second. What was your inspiration for the book? Why did you have this call to like put these words to paper and to impact lives?
Kind of like what I mentioned before is it was actually by mistake. I wish had this really cool story, but I don't. Um, I actually it was March of 2020, so you're obviously familiar. That's like right when the COVID thing started happening, and I was actually on the couch watching YouTube because I had some things that didn't go my way, and so I was watching YouTube for a little inspiration, and this video came up of this individual who wrote and published a book in like 3 months. And the immature part of me said, "Oh, is it that easy?" Which is
Right.
funny because I read a lot of books and there's no feasible way that everyone's doing that in 3 months, especially like academic terminology or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So at that moment of time, I saw that video, and luckily I was immature about it and I thought it'd be easy. So I immediately started writing. And so I had done like a little bit of a search during that writing phase of like, oh, I wonder if there's anything in hunting per- connected with my academic background in the health sciences, which is what I was really passionate about outside of, the outdoor activities, learning wise. And there wasn't anything that existed. And so at that moment in time, I started writing. And then I spent 3.5 years writing it every single day, configuring it, trying to figure out what I was hoping the audience would pull from it. I tried to come at a lot of different angles. I really emphasized the, mental wellness and spiritual wellness, because I thought that just hadn't really been talked about a ton. I think there's a lot of information, you know, publicly, but also in the hunting world of like preparing physically for your hunt. But I thought there was a lot of other avenues mentally to really look at. And so
Yeah.
I started configuring things. And, the intent of the book is not to make you necessarily a better hunter. It's so that you experience more opening days.
Yeah.
And so I always say the phrase to a lot of people when I'm in groups or giving presentations, would you rather hunt deer 5 more years or 15?
Hmm.
And right now you have the choice to position yourself to potentially make some better lifestyle choices so that you get to hunt deer 15 more years.
Right.
And 15 sounds better than 5 to me.
Yeah.
And so my question is like, why not put in a little bit more effort if hunting means that much to you and you want to keep doing it?
Yeah.
And so that was that was the intent of the book. That was the foundation. Then I just kind of built everything off there. I tried to make it practical. I tried to reduce as much of the sciency literature because most of the public is not familiar with it. So I
Hmm.
really tried to simplify it and make it practical and give a lot of options because no matter where someone is currently, they can find something for their needs
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how it formed.
Yeah, you did a great job on the book. I went through it, read it all, and I was impressed. It is in alignment with how I believe. It's also really fascinating, especially because you're talking about the spiritual side of things. Hunting is this incredible dichotomy of this world. It is the most selfish thing that we can do, and yet it is the most unselfish thing at the exact same time. We go for our own selves, but we go to bring back food for the family, for the community. We go to challenge our soul, but through challenging and sharpening our own soul and our own saw, in the words of Stephen Covey, we then are able to translate that to be better on the back end of it and be better for being a better husband, a better father, a better employee, a business owner. Like, you know, so you cover these topics, and at the same time, you covered something that resonated with me because grew up Christian. I grew up in you know contemporary Christian household, church, read the Bible, um, and but the issue that I say with this is when all you know is one thing, you think that one thing is the only thing.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, if they hear this and like, oh, I can't believe you're saying this. Like, if you have never actually looked into other religions or other ways of being or ways of thinking or spirituality, mindfulness, or it's fascinating how it actually all works together more more so than it doesn't. Um, and so talking about the spiritual aspect of what we have to do to take care of our body and our soul and our mind, our spirit through the act of hunting and being able to do it for a long term is one of the best things we ever can do. But you address the fact that the spiritual health is a huge component of making sure that you have 15 more years of opening season rather than just 5 years.
100%. I think every little component adds up to exactly what you how you wanna operate, how you wanna feel, mental clarity, all that stuff. I think every little I don't think there's one sole, habit, lifestyle hack that you can do and you're like, "Oh, no, all the systems are operating well." I think it's little tiny things that add up, and you just have to figure out specifically for your own self what that looks like and then, of course, act on it. Because
Hmm.
you can read that book, and find concepts that work, but none of it really matters unless it's incorporated on a consistent basis, not for weeks, not for months, but for years,
Yeah, we're,
putting
we're
it on repeat.
we're talking lifestyle changes, not uh, 30-day habits or 75
Yeah,
day
yeah, yeah.
fixes, right? We're
Yep.
talking about something that is able to be maintained for the longevity of our life, of our lifespan. Um, the other thing that you address in your book is ego, which I find fascinating because, from my perspective of humanity and specifically hunting culture, is that it's so machismo and egotistical. Look at me, I have to be the best, competitive, rather than the humility, being a humble soul, and saying no, this is good for the whole, rather than it's just good for me.
Yeah, and I think social media has probably shown you a little bit more of where where that, stems from.
Yeah.
You can see it at a heightened level now, unfortunately. I think there's still a lot more good. You just have to look for it. But there's definitely some character traits that are in line with the ego where you see it in the hunting space.
Hmm.
And that's unfortunate, but ultimately we can't control everyone's thoughts or what they say, but we can control how we portray certain character traits like humility, kindness, accountability. And I think by doing that and then maybe documentation of it, you can start really shifting, you know, a mindset of maybe the viewers, you can be the role model the next generation needs.
Yeah.
And I think now more than ever, that's exactly what they need. They need to see individuals who are not worried about self-image or status, and that's a rarity.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I went through a leadership program that talked about everything being feedback. Everything's
Ooh,
feedback. And feedback is neither negative nor is it positive. It's just information. What makes it negative or positive is how we interpret it.
100%.
And so our interpretation of feedback can prick our ego to then respond or lash out in certain manners, right? If someone, you walk down the street, or you were a school teacher, you know this, you smile at one of your students, and typically if you smiled at a student, they would smile right back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You frown at somebody, they majority of the time will then also frown back.
Mhm.
Um, what I've learned through this whole concept of like life is just feedback is that it's ultimately just a mirror of ourselves. And I texted you today before we started recording. I was like, "Hey, how familiar with you the law of attraction are with you?" And you're like, "Oh yeah," because you talk about it in your book. You talk about this idea of what you want, you end up finding. What is that? What is that
You
term?
find what you're looking for.
Yeah, you've always find what you're looking for. What is that? What is the psychology term for that? I'm drawing a blank. I'll have to pull that up later. But um, when what do they say? Where your focus goes, energy flows. And so you just got to fine tune and stay where you want to go and stay focused on it. And nothing else matters after that. Like, no one
Yeah.
determines your happiness, your joy, your health. You can't say, they made me this, they made me this. No, you don't give your power away as a human being. Hold on to your power because you are a powerful individual, Linden. You are a powerful individual. Everyone who's listening, you are powerful. Stop giving your power away by allowing others to quote unquote control you, because no one can control you. It's just you give your power away, right?
100%. Yeah, imagine if society adopted some of those components and they said, "I'm not gonna give my power to others." Imagine how deadly society and competitive would be.
Oh, dude.
It would be very efficient. We'd be
Ve-
getting a lot of things done.
Extremely. And time,
Yeah.
yeah, efficiency is key because we wouldn't be
Yep.
wasting our times with all this nonsense, all this minutia that gets wasted. And I'm guilty of it. I'm not perfect. There's multiple times where I've caught myself saying to my children, "You guys make me so angry." It's like, no, they don't make me so angry. I am allowing myself to get angry at the feedback that I'm receiving from my children, and I'm interpreting it, and then I am lashing out in response. Because what I know is that hurt people.
100%.
We respond. This is why life is a mirror. We respond based off of what's in our own hearts, in our own souls, in our own minds. And then we regurgitate it out on people and just constantly vomit on people through our interactions. Like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to be mean to you. Or.
Yeah. That's why it's so crucial just to, like, surround yourself with those people that are, dangerously driven. They have the humility. They're trying to make an impact. They're trying to set the next generation up for success, all those things.
Mhm.
Just surround yourself with them, ask them questions, be around them as much as you can. And like that's going to lead to a lot of good things. The
Yeah.
environment means a lot for how, it can mold someone.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now. I don't actually agree with all this book, which is part of the fact that it's okay to go through and learn about things you don't agree with. The book's called The Hidden Spirituality of Man.
Hmm,
And right now I'm in this section talking about warriors, the warrior man. And the difference between a soldier and a warrior is that a soldier has to do what he's told and doesn't get to think for himself. So when parents talk about, oh, I'm raising our little soldiers, these are, well, do they have free minds? Are they allowed and encouraged to develop their own thoughts and experience the world on their own? Versus a warrior does what's just and does things based off of what's just, what's right, what's noble. And a lot of that times is it can still lead to war, but it's not done by the directive of somebody else. They actually hold their own thoughts and hold
yeah.
their own power.
It takes a lot of discipline. A lot
Yes.
of discipline, character, the right character traits, and a conversion.
Yeah.
And that's hard to find nowadays.
Why do you think that is?
Probably a combination, like I've said, the same as health. I don't know if you can pinpoint one thing. Maybe it's a combination of years and years of um, norms, years and years of norms of however that started, or media and what we saw in movies, changing how what we thought was right or wrong, and just putting it on repeat. Um, I've had some interesting conversations with individuals about, how men have treated women in the past, and like I'm super like you saw in my Bear article, I'm super passionate about like home life, and I want there like there's a huge increase in like domestic violence and verbal, and I really want to like try and take that and leverage it in the hunting community and say like we can set our next generation up very well if we just break tradition. Tradition is like the thing that keeps everything on repeat. And at some
And
point, we have to break it.
and that is such a dangerous thing in the hunting world because so often everything is done because of tradition.
Oh, it's the opposite.
I've been sitting on this ridge because my dad sat on this ridge and his grandpa and generations, and we've been killing deer from this landing for years and
Yeah.
like that is hunting to a T of old school thinking, right? Like I always
Everything is
hunt
tradition.
I hunt the same location year after year because that's just what we do, right? And this is
Yeah.
when I started my mentorship as conservation platform, and I started challenging people because I wanted to learn how to hunt. And I'd ask questions like, "Why are you doing this?" And a lot of the times, the answer I'd get, "I don't know. It's just how I've always done it, or that's just how I was taught." And so people weren't creatively thinking; they weren't inquisitive to sharpen themselves more beyond just here's a plate of food, now eat, right?
Yeah, you're dead on. The creative, I think, is it's a dangerous space for someone to be in because it is almost like euphoria. When you're in the creative mode,
Yeah, it's
you feel like you're in full control
yeah,
of everything and dimensions and like your successes and what you decide to take on and your energy. Like the creative mode is one of the reasons I'm working on a second book. And one of the reasons I'm involved in other things is the creative is what was so alluring to me halfway through the book. I'm like, man, I really like this. I despised writing before, but now I like really like configuring something the way that I want. And now, wherever the energy feels good for me, that's where I direct it. And right now it's the creative.
yeah. Well, being a school teacher and being in the public educational system for so long, it's indoctrination, right? It doesn't teach you how to find and explore. It says, here's the lane in which you need to be,
Yeah.
and here's what you need to know to pass a test. Well, te- tests, knowing, like I wanted to be I wanted to get a degree in social studies. I love history, right? Those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. Well, when it came to getting a social studies history degree, it was all writing and remembering dates and numbers. I'm like, man, let's talk about it. Let's experience it rather than just regurgitate memorized information. Um, so it's fascinating to hear you talk about creativity. I'm a true believer in God as the creator, and it says in the Bible that we're made in His image. Well, if we're made in His image, then that means we are made also to be creators. And so when we are living a creative life, then we are truly living out our purpose as human beings. And that is where our power and energy feels. And you've said it yourself. You feel like you're in control of like time, space, dimensions, all this. You've and I want to be careful how I say this, but you almost feel like a god in that aspect because you are actually living what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah, there's probably certain strands of DNA that are turning on when you're creative that literally is like the most humanistic DNA root level you can fathom.
Yeah.
And your body's like, oh, this is like the state we're supposed to be in.
Hmm.
Like this feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one could say God given. They could also say that we're meant to be hunting too, because if you look at Genesis 27:3, it definitely says, take a bow and go get some food.
Hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
also that.
What's really interesting is and you, man, you cover so many different topics in your book that people might not be used to. If you are a general mainstream thinking, I watch the news, I listen to NPR or mainstream media, you touch on things that make people feel uncomfortable. And but it's
Yeah.
right up my alley and I love it. I eat it up. So I actually did a podcast last fall with I'm drawing a blank right now on his name. He was a contestant on the show Alone,
Oh, okay.
and he is a phenomenal survivalist. And he goes to Africa. I'm gonna have to pull up. I can't believe I'm drawing blanks on my guests like that. I apologize.
Oh,
Um,
that's okay.
what he ends up we talk about is I was like, I've gone through this growth everything is self-reliance, right? Like there's a higher power, but if we're meant to be we're meant to be creators and create in his image, then that means we have power. And this universe is all connected, right? And so you talked about grounding in your book, and I'm like, yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah, baby, grounding. Well, I'm holding up my fingers as quotations for all you listeners out there. We as hunters know that hunting good, tree huggers bad, right? Like the
Yeah.
granola side of life is like anti-hunting, and that's not good. Well, when you dive into the concept of actual grounding, like the real concept of hugging a tree is just grounding to the maximum level. And I had that realization one time. I was like, no freaking way. We are actually closer to people who believe in nature and want to protect it through the grounding aspect and its reverence than they even realize. And as hunters, we need to articulate that. We have to be able to speak about things. There's a reason why the First Amendment is the freedom of speech, because in the power of the tongue is life and death. And
Yeah.
if we, let our yes be yes and our no be no and be able to talk about things, otherwise we're just regurgitating someone else's opinion and we don't have perspectives ourselves.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that grounding is different. I try to find, some components that maybe weren't discussed a lot in this space. Maybe publicly they have been, but not in this space. And I don't know if you saw that story, but that story about me having poison oak and
Hmm.
usually having it for 2
And
months.
that's how you
And
healed
then
yourself.
yeah, and then doing a bunch of grounding sessions, and now I don't have to take medication or a shot, and I've done it twice now. So I'm 2 for 2 on using like grounding to do a lot of good things. And
Ground
yeah.
Grounding for me helps with allergies, ironically. Um, like you'll start feeling sick. It's like go touch that tree. Just stand and like
Yeah.
hold a tree limb or just and be
Yeah.
barefoot or whatever. But one of the things, and I feel like you missed this in that section, so correct me if I'm wrong. You were more talking about like taking your shoes off at camp and going barefoot. I view grounding when I'm hunting as the first time in a while that I'm actually laying on the ground more often than not. Like whether it's laying prone to shoot or looking through binoculars or crawling to sneak up on an animal, I'm in contact physically with the earth without any rubbery substance separating my electrical energy field and the earth's energy field. And that, through the aspect of hunting, is what brings me to grounding more often than not.
Yeah, and I think if that's the more that you get into skin contact with the earth, you're probably going to be sitting pretty well. And not only like grounding, but I overlap that too. Grounding is great because you also improve like gut health,
Yeah.
getting in that dirt. So there's like all these additional things that are a component of.
Yeah, so bears, I'm a bear hunter. You're a bear hunter. They're the most polarizing animal. People know that you have to cook the meat to a certain temperature to kill trichinosis, and so I remember cutting up my first bear and putting gloves on, and then having my glove get a tear and being like, "Oh no! Like, what's happening? Is this bad? Am I gonna get sick?" And then I
Yeah.
started to think, I was like, man, when I'm out hunting, especially like a backcountry style hunt, there's so much dirt under my fingernails. I bring hand sanitizer to like maybe mentally make myself feel better, but it's not like we're consistently washing our hands, we're touching food, we're making meals, we're gutting animals, we're getting dirty. And yet it's the healthiest we actually are beyond maybe the nutrition in which we bring. And that's something that you cover in your book. Um, I found to be quite fascinating.
Yeah, I think all of that dirtiness is probably the best time for you to like facilitate healing.
Uh huh.
Like getting the dirt underneath the fingernails, all over you, climbing on stuff, holding logs, doing all that. I think you gotta get in those environments as much as possible, as much as possible. But definitely the food component is something I brought up in relation to hunts because I think the food that you take on hunts can potentially I don't. know if this is the best word to use, but alter or manipulate how your aim is
Mm,
or the decisions you make
hmm.
based off how things are going in your gut and then sending signals to your brain. So you could bring, just random food and then all of a sudden your gut's not happy and then it sends poor signals to your brain and now you are making a judgment call on a stock that wasn't the right call and
Yeah.
it couldn't have, it maybe had nothing to do with you making the wrong call, but the food that you ate that afternoon.
Mm.
And that right there is peeling back the layers.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Nutrition. So I did carnivore diet, started January 1st, and I really thrived on it. I slept better than I've ever slept before in my entire life. I was dropping weight and size very rapidly. Not that I wanted to get, I actually went below my target weight, which then I had to adjust what I was doing because I wanted to maintain a certain size. Otherwise, I had to buy an entire new wardrobe of clothes and that was expensive. But I was like, okay, how do I maintain this through hunting season? Right? Like, how do I maintain this type of nutritional choices when I'm out in the mountains or out in the woods? Because now that I live in Texas, the whole idea like whitetail woods, right? So the little Debbie snacks of like what snacks are you eating in the blind, or I love comfort food when I go hunting, especially when I was a backpacker. Like peanut butter M and M's or peanut M&Ms, I'd always take with me and make my own type of trail mix. Well, not the healthiest stuff. So um, I know Ryan Lampers, he is continually doing carnivore diet even while he's going on his hunts and stuff. But what have you done to uh, attack diet when it comes to your hunting trips?
Good question. So, one, I'll just set the preface. I'm definitely not anti you can't have a treat ever.
Hmm.
I operate off the rule of thumb of, in general, the rule of 50. So during the off season, if it's something I can maintain for 50 years, then I'm going to do that. So if I want to have a little piece of cheesecake on a Saturday, I can, but I'm also going to eat really well. So when I get to hunting season, I try and take that same approach.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm going to have maybe some salmon packets and some freeze dried eggs, and I'm a huge fan of whole fruit that's freeze dried. I think fruit's like one of the best performance enhancing things you can have on a hunt.
Yeah.
It hits the vitamins, minerals, the carbs that you need. So I'm a huge proponent of that. And sure, if you want to have a little treat, whatever that looks like for an individual, I think that's perfectly fine.
Hmm.
I think it's where it's a consistent level of treats all of the time is where you start where it can lead to implications. So I'm definitely not like, hey, never eat Cheez Its ever again, or whatever it is that you really like. Never eat ice cream again.
Hmm.
I actually say in the book, I'm like, I think you should go smash a bowl of ice cream. Go eat it if you want.
Yeah.
I think that's realistic for most humans, whatever that looks like, to have a treat, but know when to put the brake pedal down and to be disciplined and to get back into that little zone of eating nutrient dense foods,
Yeah.
and then you'll know yourself when is the right time to have a treat. I've earned it. And
Yep.
I take that same approach with hunting. So sure, I have a lot of nutrient dense foods. I am a huge proponent of carrying salt and I dive into that quite a bit. Um, I think that's one of the most undervalued food related items you could take in a pack is unrefined salt. I
y-
think that's
Yep.
I think it's the big one of the most performance enhancing things you could do. Anyways, I still think you can have a treat. It's up to the individual's goals and what they think is maintainable, and whatever that is,
Yeah.
that's what they should do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people, there's two camps, right? Well, maybe there's three camps when it comes to hunting. There's the I'm going on a vacation. This is a vacation type trip, and then there's the I'm going to work trip, right? Where grab your hard hat and your lunch pail and let's go do this.
Yeah.
Um, and that goes back to a different topic: is what do you want to get out of hunting, right? Because that you know you have to know what your target is, because if you don't have a target, you're never going to hit anything. You have to be focused. Um, so identifying that, I find it to be pretty impactful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if your goal is just to go out and have a good experience, then that's awesome. If your goal is to go in 12 miles and like get after it and find a very mature animal, then that preparation looks quite different.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on your book, your Hunting Health Span 73 Ways Hunters Can Age Better and Prevent Disease. How did you come up with your 73 ways? Or was there more? Or did you like, that's good enough? We'll
Uh,
stop there.
that's been asked a few times. I didn't just arrive at that number. Originally, it was 50, and to give context, I was working with a publishing company who was helping me with this process, and the way that it was formatted at the time, I had 50. It just didn't really line up with what they were showing me in terms of like structure,
Hmm.
which is a whole nother story in itself in terms of how they prefaced it. They said, "This is the part where we hurt your feelings for the editing."
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, we changed some things and then it just kind of arrived at 73, and the structure and how it was phased out and lined up with like how I was envisioning it. I just didn't know how to put it.
Right.
And so that's kind of how it arrived at 73. I wish it was, some great story like, oh, I know exactly 73 ways. It wasn't like that. It was accumulation of things, a lot of like tons of edits and reconfiguring stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I love it. Well, where can people find your book at?
Good question. You can pretty much find it anywhere books are sold. So you can find it Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, any store that houses books. You'll be able to find it.
Awesome. Awesome. What type of feedback have you gotten from your book so far?
What's interesting is my expectation. There's certain chapters that I felt really good about, and I
Hmm.
haven't told a ton of people. Where like I wrote it, and I'm like, I don't know, I can't write that any better, and it's never been written before. And what's funny is a lot of the feedback. It's been really positive. It's been great so far. Um, People are telling me what they're pulling from it, and it's like the last thing I'm expecting. It's like the exact last. Yeah, they're telling me like, "Oh, man, I really like this concept. I started adopting this and it's really helped out," or this or that, and I'm like, I didn't say it, but in my mind, I'm like, "That's the thing that you took from that?" But, I think that's the beauty of individuality
Yeah.
is you find that one thing that clicks that maybe I didn't think it would click, but it did.
Hmm.
And so I think that's been really fun for me is to like see where people are pulling things because they're pulling things from there that I would have never thought.
Yeah.
I would have thought it would have been from chapter 6, the second section of it where I wrote this section that literally I was like, that's the best section I've ever written. And you know what is funny is no one has ever said anything about it. And
I'm
so,
gonna pull up your book right now. I'm gonna see what
yeah, it's
what
like
chapter
I think
6 is.
oh gosh, yeah, so I think there's definitely components that have been surprising to me.
Oh yeah,
So,
rewiring your brain, dude. This is what we talked about on the podcast tonight, man. You got to change your way of thinking and ways of being. That's
yeah,
powerful.
there's definitely yeah, it's just kind of funny. So it's been a great experience. I think the first and foremost thing, if anyone ever decides to write a book, is you create it for yourself, and then everything else afterwards just kind of happens. And I think going at that with that pace and that thought process is whatever happened afterwards wasn't going to bother me
Hmm.
because I created something that one never existed and is going to outlive myself many of years.
Yep.
And so it was fun to put it together, which is why I, kept writing and all that stuff.
That's the thing that people often forget. We when we do things for other people, we burn out quickly. You always got to make sure you do it for yourself, right? When you go on an airline and you fly somewhere, what do they say? Put your own oxygen mask on first before
Yeah.
you put on someone else's for them. And that is another thing that is once again not taught in society. So I love your concept of rewiring your brain because you have to then pause, reflect, and be like, okay, no, this is actually what needs to happen. Moms need to make sure that they are taken care of because all they do is give to their babies, their infants. And if they don't take care of themselves, they're no good for anybody.
That is it. That is spot on. You nailed it. I mean, that should be a book in itself right there.
Right?
It should.
Well, I'll tell you this. You inspired me to actually get my book published. I have had a lot of words and a lot of thoughts in my days, and it's time to actually make it happen. I like you were talking about voice writing rather than actually typing stuff out. I think I might take you up on that. That's a good idea. So, brother, I'm really honored to have you on as a guest. I can't believe that you are now sitting in a high class of respected people that have been guests on the Soul Seekers podcast. But at the same time, this is a part of what makes Soul Seekers podcast so powerful is that we put the heart back into hunting. Not that it was removed at any point, but it's a reminder to stay centered and grounded in everything that we do. So thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for bringing me on. I appreciate it. That was an awesome conversation. Always open for it.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. I love it. Any words of wisdom that you want to leave our audience with?
Oh, geez, that could go a lot of different angles. Any words of wisdom? Yeah, I think if there's one piece of advice that I would say is just never forget the law of averages, which is in this context, more effort equals more return. So the more effort you put into things in life, the more return you're going to get. You just don't know when the return's going to happen, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. Stay consistent. Just keep
That's
going.
right.
Just keep
There you
going.
go.
I
Yep.
love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Soul Seekers podcast with author Linden Loren of Your Hunting Lifespan. I really want to tell you to go check out his book, reach out to Linden. Linden, where can people connect with you at, by the way?
A few places. So I do have a website that I'm a part of with a group of guys called Camo and Wind, where we will have a Northwest Hunting Journal for Life coming out this next year. So you can reach out there, and Instagram, of course, and then LinkedIn. Those are kind of the three options for reaching out.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, go check them out. Go tell them what you thought of the book and all that. Remember that hunting is constantly under attack, and specifically, it's under attack in the state of Oklahoma right now, which could potentially set a precedent for and domino effect for taking down hunting across this entire nation with ballot box biology. We have to be advocates. We got to carry this all the way through the finish line. We have to defeat these anti-hunting crazies that want to take away and steal and rob from us everything that helps make us a better human and makes our communities that much better and stronger. So be on the lookout. You go get involved. Linden, you actually made a post about it is what defendthehunt.org. Is that what it is?
Oh gosh, you'd have to look back at the post. Once it goes up, then it's erased. But I think Protect Wildlife.
I'm going to pull this up right here
Yeah, you should pull it up.
because I need to make
There's
sure. There is an organization right now that is specifically requesting funds because they have actually dialed in the defense of how to respond and attack back at these people that are trying to steal from us. Let me pull it up right here. I gotta get in the internet. All right, so here we go.
Wildlife Deserve Better campaign.
There we go. Wildlife Deserve Better campaign. So if you go to wildlifedeservebetter.com, go check out, donate if you can. I know money's tight, definitely in my household and across this world with this crazy inflation that's going on. But if you want to make sure hunting lasts for generations to come, we got to make sure that we put our money where our mouth is.
100%.
So go get involved with that. But everyone else, remember that you got to be the change you want to see in the world. It starts with you. It only takes a spark to start a fire. And if you want hunting to last for generations to come, then you got to be the change you want to see in the world. Hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, and that you can never outgive good, as mentorship is conservation. Thanks for tuning in this week's episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. For Johnny Mack and Linden Loren, be blessed, freedom on, and as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group. as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.